Welcome to Take It from the Iron Woman. My name is Susanne Müller, your host and the Iron Woman. This podcast is about empowering yourself and others to make real changes in the world. You will hear from everyday, smart, sophisticated, hip people like you and me. Not everybody has to be an Iron Woman to impress the world. Together, we will learn from the sports and business leaders how you can become a more successful person as an entrepreneur or a leader. It's one step at a time, one day at a time. Take your steps now. Take your big steps now. Join me on this journey to success. This podcast is being sponsored by Get Loopy. On episode 41, you can hear the story of Isabel, the co-founder and CEO. Get Loopy, get a 20% discount off your first order. GetLoopy.com. Take it from the Iron Woman. I say we only have special guests, but today is a very dear friend of mine, Lara. How did we meet? Introduce yourself.
Hi, Suzanne. Thank you so much for having me today. We met about 4 or 5 years ago through a course you offered at NYU, and it was coaching techniques for leadership.
It was called sports coaching. It was part of the coaching certification at NYU. It was focusing on sports. That's how my journey in a way started. I want to have a class where we focus on sports and how we can transfer that into leadership or into life. And I was very fortunate that I was able to create that job. And then the book came out, Global Business Coaching with Sports Parallel. So I think I'm very grateful of the NYU who were actually giving me the right to start that venture.
And it really was wonderful. And I'm so glad that also through that experience, we got to meet each other and we kept connected throughout all these years, mostly for our love for Kilimanjaro.
Tell us where you're from, where you're now, and what's happening in your life.
I'm originally from Brazil, but I've been living in the US now for about 11 years. It has not been a straight journey from Brazil here. At the time when I moved here, I had been living in China, and my background is in international relations. And at the time, I worked with the Brazilian embassy in Beijing as an international trade consultant. And I transitioned from that to working with the Olympic Games, leading up to the Beijing 2008 Olympic Games. At the time, I was working with the leading hospitality company for the Games. And through that experience, I met my husband, who happens to live here. And that's how we got to move here together. But it's been an incredible and truly energizing experience so far.
Tell us a little bit about your Olympic journey. Obviously, when we first met, I was intrigued. She's worked at the Olympics. That would have been always my dream. I think initially when they had the Olympics in Salt Lake City, through a friend of mine, he says, maybe I can get you there. And I was like, I want to go tomorrow. And it didn't happen. So when I met you, I was like, how is it? Tell us, how magic is it? And how much work? I think when we watch TV, we only see the end. I think that's also when we do the coaching and the Kilimanjaro, whatever, we only see the end result. But whatever leads up to that, it's that journey that is absolutely more important than the destination. But obviously, we only see the opening ceremony. Everything is beautiful. But tell us about it. How is it?
You know what? You used a word that is precisely how it felt to me the first time I experienced the environment of the Olympic Games, the Olympic movement, really. And that word is magic. It really is. It's absolutely magical. I was awestruck when I first walked into the stadium at the occasion for the opening of the Beijing 2008 Olympic Games with just the variety, the diversity of people, and the amount of joy that we got to experience together. It was the energy in the room was just extremely uplifting, and to see people from all kinds of backgrounds come together to experience that joy. I was like, I want to forever be a part of this. But it didn't start there, did it? It definitely starts with 7 years of preparation to get to that place. There's a lot more that happens before those 7 years, but once the cities they bid to be able to host an Olympic game, and that's a process that starts prior to those 7 years of preparation. Once a city is announced as a winner for that bid, then 7 years of making it happen goes into it for those 18 days to be what they are. And that's on the end of the organizers. There's a whole other journey for the athletes themselves. A lot of them who've been working on it pretty much most of their lives to get to that place. So once it all comes together, it truly is magical.
And tell us, what was your role, or what do you do in those 7 years up to the very first day of the Olympics?
At the time, I had joined the company to work as a trainer. At the time, I was a recruiter and a trainer for their local staff to work with them during the Olympic Games. So that's the stage in which I joined the bandwagon. It was a very interesting experience. We're a group of 9 trainers, each from a different place around the world, no two alike, who got to interview a pool of 6,000 university students in the tourism industry and selected 1,500 of them and got to train them for a year on a multitude of topics. So aside from teaching diversity and on cultures around the globe, hospitality, protocol, the Olympic Games, I've always made it a point as well to provide students with the knowledge and tools on emotional intelligence, leadership skills, teamwork, and the well-being of relationship dynamics.
What I'm hearing is the Olympics, and also for me, it's very magical. I'm glued to the TV. I wished I could be there at one point. That's probably a dream in my life, to be at one of the Olympics. And you talk about the energy, and we talk about energy is the enthusiasm of the participants, of the athletes. And then you say emotional intelligence, leadership, and now you transfer that into a new calling or passion. So Lara, you have been in Beijing, but I think you also have been in other Olympics after Beijing.
I worked for the Olympics for about 11 years. And through that period of time of my life, I worked with a lot of different companies. I worked with a lot of different individuals. I certainly wore many hats under that company that I worked with. But most of the times, what was more important to me, and it's something that I've always made a point of, was to encourage everyone that I was working with, especially through the training, that I would cultivate self-awareness and help them with their identity belief systems, understand what their core values were, know and understand why he or she does or choose to do what one chooses to do, what motivates them, what is their biggest driving force, and how they can choose to apply themselves. How can they offer ownership, reliability, accountability, and authenticity to whomever they came in contact with. And that empowered so much of particularly the young local staff to truly offer their best selves to their experience of the Olympic Games and to the experience of the clients during the Olympic Games. That has always been a source of inspiration to me, to be able to facilitate that process for someone else.
So you've been in Beijing and you were in Brazil?
So from Beijing, I worked at the Vancouver 2010 Olympic Games, London 2012 Games, the Sochi 2014 Olympics, Rio 2016 Olympics, and then Pyeongchang 2018 Olympic Games. And as I transitioned from that period of my life into motherhood, my work with the Olympic movement has been interrupted. However, I continue to invest on tools that equip me with has always been a natural pull, which is to do this facilitation of self-knowledge and self-actualization.
I would like to know a little bit more about the Olympics. What are things that are standing out? What are the differences between Beijing, Vancouver, Rio? What are some highlights that you've had out of those many cool experiences? What can you share with the listeners?
I absolutely love that you asked that. No two places are ever alike, no two people are ever alike. And the fabric of such diversity coming in together really weave this beautiful tapestry of challenges. There has always been honestly welcoming to be able to overcome them, to be able to get creative with how we approach those challenges and how we get to know differences and how we get to work together in bringing something wonderful together. For each one of them, truly, my favorite thing has been to be able to assess the experiences of our staff post games, the trajectory that they've taken prior to come on board with us. And how was that experience for them? What were the expectations coming into the games, to work for the games? How those expectations met or unmet during their work with the games. And a year after the Olympics, the impact, that training that they received and the experience that they received have had moving forward in their lives where they are now because of it. We've always addressed that, and that has by far has always been like my favorite project that I've ever been involved with. After each one of the games, we've asked the staff to write to us addressing their journey. And oh my gosh, those essays, you laugh with them, you cry with them, you cheer for them. The beauty of the encounters, the rawness of the moments in which they were extremely vulnerable or exposed to something that was completely unfamiliar to them, and they had to work through it. I mean, you have only 18 days. It's not like you're going to get a chance to address it like a week from now. A week from now, it's not happening anymore. There's so much beauty and so much wisdom that comes forth from those acts. There's also so much beauty that comes from like the voices that are being expressed through each of the cultural lenses. In Beijing, they would be extremely poetic about how they express themselves. And in Russia, they were like quite stoic on how they express themselves. And those are generalizations. Each carry so much from our environment. And it's so much part of like our belief system. It's so ingrained that no matter how we want to put ourselves out there, whether we are aware of it or not, so much of our family culture and our nation culture is part of how we bring ourselves forth, express ourselves, put ourselves out there. That really comes through as well in each of those experiences from Brazil, from the joy that comes in their words. Each one of them is like very different, very unique, and it by far has been the highlight of my experience.
And also when you think the Olympics, it's 18 days, as you said, but listening to you, I'm just realizing you have been there longer. I think the last time when we spoke, you said you would be 4 years somewhere. Is that correct? Is that the number? How long were you living in those places when the Olympics would take place?
It varied. In Beijing, I was already living there. So I lived in Beijing for 3 years, involved with the games a year and a half prior to the games. And in Vancouver, because of its close proximity with the US, we were able to do a lot of back and forth. So we were living there about 2 months prior. So it really varied. The offices are pretty much set 7 years in advance. So as soon as the host city is announced, the companies are already like moving resources towards the host city in order to get themselves prepared for the delivery of games.
But in 2 days' times, like we do Zoom calls and everything, in prior times, you would be locally there and you would recruit the local people. So I think that's amazing that you also had to change every time there was a new Olympic for you. So I'm wondering, how was that for you? Exciting? And
it has always been a very different experience. Each place you go, you have to go from a place, you have to walk into it from a place of humility and openness. You need to be willing to get to know your host and not coming in, I'm here with all the solutions. That's a premise for a terrible relationship dynamic.
So you lived in a different country all the time. And how was that for you?
I've always loved it. Even growing up in Brazil, I've never lived anywhere in more than 4 consecutive years. So my whole life, I think, was preparing me for this. As a matter of fact, I realized when I was finally building roots, I guess settling in, was when I was reaching my 4 years living in the United States, married and all, with a home, and we had not started our family yet. So it felt to me very much that I was still that person who kept moving around around, very independent and with like little attachments, always looking for the next adventure. And it was at a point, Sochi 2014 Olympics came at a point in my life in which I was reaching the 4-year mark. There was an opportunity for us to move there. Once the move didn't happen, I was at a loss of like understanding. Or I was like, what do you mean? And it took me at least 6 months. That's how long it took me to realize that has been a pattern my whole life, that I was always somewhere else within 4 years range. And once I missed that mark, went over that mark somewhere, which it happens to be in the US, it took me a while to be okay with that. It is. It's been interesting.
This is amazing. And it's funny that you almost like you get bored because the project hasn't ended. And what do we do now? So now you morphed into motherhood. And I'm wondering, this is just a question into the future. Are you getting bored every 4 years? You need to move with your kid. You've been stationary for the past whatever years, right?
Once I went over that mark, it took me a lot of self-work to be able to settle into that new reality. And that was pre-kids. So my husband and I have now been together for 11, 12 years. I really took my time to be able to choose this life. Once I chose to build a family together with my husband, and God bless him, he really waited. Once I chose that, I knew it would be like the extra level of commitment and adaptation and settling for me. And now that I have a second child, I see how big the difference is. It's been since I've had my first one. It's rewarding to be able to look into it and see that the self-work paid off. It was worth it to take my time and to look into some of my patterns and my narratives, how that could be a disservice to future choices. With that, actually, I haven't been working with the games now for about 2 years and a half. Still, the family is within that business. There has never been a time in history in which an Olympics have been canceled. So talking about having to adapt.
Thank you so much, Lara. This was really great. And let's hope that the Olympics will be starting next year in Japan with a beautiful opening ceremony. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Suzanne.
What are you taking away here? Take it from the Iron Woman. We have episodes every Monday, every Wednesday. Chime in. We have something for everybody. And don't forget to order Get Loopy. You get 20% off of your first order. And Take It From the Iron Woman is also a book. You can order it on Amazon as a paperback or an ebook. And coaching, mentoring, anything like this is available. Don't be shy. Reach out. Thank you very much. See you next time.